Welcome back, everyone. I'm I-Team Chief Mike Magnoli. Well, can you believe it? The general election is about a month away, and when we vote for president here in Palm Beach County, we'll also be voting for a new state attorney. Now, back in the summer, when we launched ARC Florida, I kicked off a segment called Justice on the Ballot, live interviews with candidates trying to become the county's top prosecutor. First, there was a crowded field because of the primary. There were 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats who wanted to advance to the next round. Well, now there's only 1 of each, and there is also a candidate who is not affiliated with any party. That would be Adam Farkas, and he is with me here this morning. Adam, you know, without a party affiliation, you might be considered the dark horse in this race. I want to talk about your strategy. How do you appeal to a voter that's in the Sam Stern camp or in the Alexia Cox camp and bring them over to the Adam Farkas side?
Well, I think that every citizen would expect their criminal justice system to be completely fair and impartial and nonpartisan. The problem with both Sam Stern and Alexia Cox is they're exceptionally political. They are very political, but what's worse is they're making misrepresentations of their training and experience. For example, Sam Stern puts on his resume and goes to these talks saying that he teaches at University of Miami Law School as a trial advocacy professor and that he teaches at University of Virginia Law. That's literally completely false. He doesn't teach at University of Virginia Law. His dad has a course up in Virginia where they use the facilities of the University of Virginia. Now that's just a little taste of the plethora of misrepresentations made by Mr. Stern. And all it takes is Google. What's disappointing is that certain news, endorsements and papers don't feel a need to do any fact checking. If you look at the bios that the Palm Beach Post lists and the Sun Sentinel, they just take their facts as true. There's absolutely zero fact checking. And I'm confident that actually if every citizen did a little bit of fact checking, they would absolutely choose me as the candidate to be the next state attorney.
Oh boy, okay. All right, there was a lot there. I want to talk about current events. Let's look at in September. The state attorney's office allowed the local man who had made threats against former President Trump and his family basically off with a slap on the wrist. The suspect's name was Michael Weissman. No jail time for him. And if he behaves for a year and gets some therapy, he can buy a gun. Now, it's true he had no violent criminal history, but Adam, I want to talk about what your prosecutors would do differently, right? If Adam Farkas was the state attorney, how would that case have been handled?
Well, a number 1 priority would be to make sure that he could never possess a gun again,
okay.
Right? He doesn't. I don't know enough about the gentleman about whether he's mentally ill or not, but regardless, when you have any sort of threat like this, they should never be able to possess a gun again. So to accomplish that, you either need to get him some certain conviction, either a felony conviction, but you can also get him mental health treatment at the same time. But what would be a priority was making sure that he could never possess a gun again, and then also get the help that he may need.
I want to talk about prostitution in Lake Worth. The I-Team has done a series on this. We've called it The Brothel Next Door. And it's not just prostitution, it's also drugs and violence that goes with that type of business. An arrest was made last week, but the guy immediately bonded out and is back out on the streets. This is a really difficult issue to tackle for law enforcement. I'd like to know what you would do as state attorney to address that problem in the county.
Well, again, the problem starts at the beginning, right? When they're first arrested. When you have prosecutors who aren't properly trained and don't have the proper experience, they don't have proper case evaluation, right? So they're giving bonds or letting people out that should never be let out. And sometimes they're holding people in that should never be held in. So what happens is the entire system is based on proper prosecutorial discretion and independence and fairness. So if you have the proper prosecutors that approach every case correctly, you'll end up with the right result.
We're looking at some of the houses. It's just unbelievable that they're right there in residential areas where families have children. And earlier this week, a 14-year-old was arrested for a fatal shooting at one of those houses. It's alleged that he was trying to do an armed robbery at one of the brothel houses. Now, I know that you're very passionate about teenagers. If they're involved in a gun crime, they need to have the best chance at getting on the straight and narrow. But here we have a young man who took somebody else's life while he was committing another crime, Let me pick your brain about this. I think that they should have tried. I think that they should try him as an adult, and I feel like a lot of people out there would agree with me. What about you?
So, you know, you have a lot of different options between juvenile court and adult court. So just because you're charged as an adult, that doesn't mean that you can't get juvenile sanctions. Or just because you're a juvenile, that doesn't mean that you can't be held in a program past 18. So, you know, you got to look at every case completely individually. I will tell you, homicide is one of those crimes that normally they get charged as an adult. Now, obviously, you can't seek the death penalty, and in the state of Florida, the Supreme Court has held that you can't give them a life sentence even. So you can no longer give juveniles life sentences. So
Even in a murder, no life sentence?
Well, the court would need to make special findings. But no, even in a murder, you cannot give a juvenile a life sentence.
And you agree with that? On principle, you do?
On principle, I do, because, you know, the kid's 14, so are we going to keep him in prison when he's 70 and just pay for him to keep being there when he's no longer a threat? I mean, the purpose of incarceration is obviously punishment, right? But it's to protect the community and deterrence, right? So once he's served 50 years, which is actually more than a life sentence in most states in this country, maybe he should be have the ability to parole. But right now, he needs to be incarcerated for a very, very long time.
Okay. Next item here, I want to talk about the West Palm Beach Police Department is catching a lot of bad press. Earlier this week, the chief of police was terminated, and you have, we're hearing 5 officers, high-ranking officers, are on leave under investigation for financial improprieties. We also had a case earlier this summer where 7 officers were involved in a pursuit of a suspect. They crossed over town lines. When they got into Boynton Beach, there was a car accident. The suspect crashed into another vehicle, and 2 innocent people lost their lives. And these officers involved in this chase are under investigation by the Public Corruption Unit of the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office. So that segues into my question here about if the cop is the accused, what does State Attorney Adam Farkas do?
Well, I start out by being completely independent, right? The idea of the State Attorney's Office is it's a checks and balances, right? We are checks and balances on law enforcement. Law enforcement makes arrests. It's up to us to determine whether they acted properly, whether the arrest is correct. And when they do things wrong, it's up to us to prosecute them, right? But what will happen is I do plan on starting a first responders diversion program court similar to our veterans court. Because, you know, when you read about the law enforcement and firefighters, they suffer a lot of the same things as our veterans, whether it's PTSD or anything. And when they get in trouble legally, they could lose their ticket, never have, you know, even for a low-level crime. What we plan on setting up is similar to our veterans court. First-time offender, first responders, law enforcement, and firefighters will have a chance to go to a different court where they get the help they need and where they don't get felony convictions to ruin their livelihood.
Interesting premise. I'd love to talk with you more, but the producers are telling me we're out of time. Adam Farkas, I appreciate you coming on to our show, and we'll talk to you again probably before the election.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.